This week on the show, we're going to be talking with Hiroki Saito about the status of BSD in Japan. We'll also get to hear about how he got on the core team, and we might just find out why NetBSD is so popular over there. So, of course, answers to all your emails, the latest news, and even a brand new segment today on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 59, recorded October 15th, 2014. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're glad to have you guys with us this week. Another exciting episode. We got a nice interview we're going to play a little later that we did with Hiroki Saito-san. So you'll definitely want to sit around for that and hear it about the state of BSD in Japan. But before we get into that, we should go ahead and start doing our headlines. But we should also mention, too, this episode's not being brought to you over SSL v3. Just putting that out there. So we're good. Hey, and I saw something interesting in the news this last week. I guess, with the number of viewers we have, we're getting close to MSNBC level ratings here. So that's pretty exciting.
Yes, there we go.
I don't know if that's good for us or bad for them, but either way, it's still
good stuff.
Kind of cool.
Yes.
So. Okay, well, seriously, though, on to the actual BSD news. So First up, a whole slew of BSD talks at the X Developers Conference 2014. Where did they hold that, by the way? I didn't see.
I'm not sure where that was. I think it was in Europe.
Somewhere in Europe.
Yes.
An unspecified location.
That's a secret location.
Building, yes.
But they have many, many videos, but we highlighted a bunch of them that are specific to BSD. Matthew Herb from OpenBSD gave a talk about the status of the OpenBSD graphics stack, and it also details what they've done recently with Xenokera, the OpenBSD fork of Xorg that allows running it without root and a bunch of other stuff, and the OpenBSD kernel for graphics and so on. And we also include a link to his slides as well as the video. Then Jean-Sebastien Pedron did the status of the FreeBSD graphics stack, and we have his slides as well. And he talks about basically starting with the history of how FreeBSD's graphics stack is, and then how changing to DRM affected things, and what was wrong with our original DRM port. They changed too many things to replace them with the FreeBSD specific ones, and that meant that updating that port was harder, and so that a lot of that work had to be redone. And then so they've resumed that, and we'll talk a little bit more of that in the status report in the next story, but hopefully we'll have a much newer DRM graphics stack in FreeBSD for 10.1 so that everybody can have Haswell graphics.
Well, has the boat already sailed on that one, though? They've already done like a 10.1 RC2.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the plan is there. Core decided that we would have support for that in 10.1, so I don't know exactly how that fits with release engineering's plans.
I keep watching. Every morning I'm checking, like, did it get put in? Did it get put in? I'm like,
so far it's like,
RC2.
They dropped a patch that does everything required in order to actually add the functionality, but didn't add the functionality, and they wanted to test that for regressions, and then nothing's happened since. And it's like
it hasn't even gone into current yet.
Right, it's like just floating around on a mailing list. I'm not sure what's happening there. I'm going to have to...
we'll have to chase some people down and find out.
Worst case at Meet BSD, but hopefully by then it would be probably too late. So I don't know what the plan is.
Okay, well, we'll keep you posted. Yes. As soon as it drops, obviously we're going to mention it because it's something we're both looking forward to.
But he in his slides he talks about the ports tree side of it as well, not just what's in the kernel, but also and the problems they're facing with. Well, technically the ports tree has to support FreeBSD 8.4 that's never going to get these KMS drivers.
Sure.
Right. And then it shows, how 9.3 and forward have the Radeon drivers as well. And 10.1 has the new hardware context switching and so on.
That's cool. So I guess, does that mean in the ports tree we have that with new Xorg option? Is that going to be renamed at some point? Since
basically that's going to become
like 4 years
that's
old?
going to be the default instead.
So we need a with new Xorg
right,
if you want to try more.
Yeah, so basically
stuff.
Because we don't have a provides requires system, it wasn't possible to have both kinds of X in the tree at once. So their ugly solution was the with new XOR flag, and it explains the differences between those and how that came about and what heartache that caused.
Yeah.
And how it's, yes, very confusing for end users. That's and a nightmare to maintain. Yes,
Definitely.
it was a fiasco for both developers and users. Like, let's not do that again.
Well, I mean, I remember when it came out, we switched to turning that on by default. I think like 2 weeks into it, we were like, we want that. Let's flip that on. And it really didn't cause as much pain as people would think.
Yeah, but you don't have to support FreeBSD 8.4.
Yeah, that is true. I do not have to support 8.4 anymore.
And also talk about getting GPU stuff. So like being able to do general purpose computing on your GPU.
That'd be
and
cool.
also a rootless X server, being able to,
That'd be a great feature.
Systemd apparently solves part of that problem, but how are we going to do it on FreeBSD? And then plans for Wayland and Weston and how to get that working and so on. So it's good talk. Nice. Then also Francois Thurgeau gave a talk on porting the DRM and KMS drivers to Dragonfly BSD and tells the story of how he ported those over. And he has his slides as well.
Cool. So we got links to basically a ton of slides and the associated YouTube video.
Yes, so you can watch it and follow along on the slides and everything. Very well done.
That's really cool. Yeah, if you find any of this interesting, if you're a desktop workstation user or like to, mess around with X and stuff, definitely take a look. Yep. A lot of good content there. Okay, next up, speaking of a lot of content, we got the FreeBSD quarterly status report is out. And this is another one of those massive lists where we'll try going through some of it. But let's go through, I guess, the highlights that TJ gave us here first.
Well, I wrote those highlights, but yeah.
Oh, you wrote this? Okay.
Mostly because I knew trying to go through this live, I was going to miss something. So
there's a lot on here.
But yeah, just the index of it is huge. But they have status reports from all the different FreeBSD teams, ongoing projects, work in the kernel, work on architectures like ARM and ARM64, user land programs being developed, the ports team and what they've been doing is on top of Python, GNOME, KDE, graphics stacks, SFC, all the different teams that are working in ports, the documentation groups, and some miscellaneous stuff. But they talk about the core teams report, talked about they're promoting git.freebsd.org to be an official FreeBSD service. So that's managed by cluster admin and has all the guarantees you get with any other FreeBSD service.
That makes me very happy, by the way. I will mention that.
They got permission from Microsoft to make sure that including the DC TCP protocol is acceptable under the patent or whatever was the question was there. They also mediated between groups of contributors and committers to move forward on the ASLR stuff. And worked with the FreeBSD Foundation to obtain a license for Zenforo, which is a forum software, to switch the FreeBSD forums over to that. Because the switch from vBulletin, because of the security issues, to PHPBB lost a lot of functionality and people weren't too happy with that. So they're apparently going to be switching again, but they got something good. The other big one was that they negotiated with Oracle to get access to officially supported Java 7 and 8 in FreeBSD.
Yes, about time. Yes. That is fantastic. Sorry, we've been waiting for that for years. So, official Java binary. That sounds
we had
like
those with Sun.
Yes,
so we had those with Sun, and then they went away. But so the way
they got stale real fast.
Well, Sun all of a sudden was Java, and then nothing was happening. So this is more. It's still OpenJDK, so code can flow both ways, and everything will be happy. It's just that. We have access to their testing framework or whatever, and allows them to sign off that this is officially supported Java, even though you got it from the FreeBSD ports tree or whatever. So it won't even be that hodgepodge like we had with the Sun binaries back with the old Diablo stuff, where it's like, well, you have to agree to Sun's license agreement and download it from Sun and then put it in the port tree and then compile it. And it's like,
go to this web, and it got more complicated as time went on. Go to this website, make an account. Oh wait, I can't remember. Oh wait, now where do I go now that I'm logged in? And I got to grab. Wait, which patches do I need again? That was a pain in the rear before. Well, we also got, looks like some continued work on Beehive is mentioned here. They have an update on the iSCSI offload support, which Chelsea 10 gigabyte Ethernet and 40 gigabyte Ethernet NICs.
Yeah, so the Chelsea NICs have hardware on them that can do some of the work. And the in-kernel iSCSI target and Initiator now both support that in a hardware agnostic way, so that adding an accelerator for an Intel NIC in the future won't be as much work.
Nice.
There's also been progress on the ASLR to get the address-based layout randomization into FreeBSD. People have been working on Zen paravirtualized mode. So running 64-bit FreeBSD with like the patched kernel, the old way of doing it in Zen, which hopefully would mean FreeBSD available in more types of public clouds and places that are renting VPSs and stuff like that. As part of the iSCSI work, kind of separate but done by the same person, they also have iSCSI acceleration for VMware and Hyper-V. So this implements the two new protocols, one from Microsoft and one from VMware, called VAAI for VMware and ODX for Microsoft. And it basically allow, when you're using iSCSI as the backing for your VMware, the VMware can send special commands to the iSCSI saying, hey, I need you to do all of this stuff, instead of having to write the individual blocks. So it can do things like, say, fill this file with zeros, and instead of having to write all those zeros over the network, it just says, hey, from here to here, all zeros.
Just do this.
And it does it,
Oh, that's cool.
It has extended copy, which is a clone command. So you can just say clone that, which is very helpful. Write same, which is, write all zeros or whatever. And dead space reclamation or unmap. So you can say this whole chunk of space was deleted in the VM, so you can free it under the underlying block store, which is kind of like trim support for your ZVol, which is quite useful. And also, it may be required to support trim if you're backing your VMware with SSDs and so on. So it talks about that. There's a status update on the Debian/KFreeBSD project. It was actually interesting to see that in the FreeBSD status report. Talks about all the work that's gone into it and what they've done and why they did it, and how it has been benefiting both Debian and FreeBSD. And the fact that while doing it, they also found one of the kernel bugs that was one of the security advisors we had a couple months ago. And they've been found it very useful, and being able to have native ZFS on a Linux machine is quite useful. And also, as PCBSD has found, that using the Debian bootstrap for in the Linux jail has been very interesting.
Yeah, that's been interesting is a good word to describe that. Well, let's see. So what else we got here? Pixie automated installation work from a Google Summer of Code project.
Yeah, so this extends BSD install to have more scripting support, and then basically make a version of it that you can script, where on your DHCP server you say, hey, load this file. And then it looks for that file dot the MAC address of the machine, and if that doesn't exist, it falls back to the default, so that you can configure each machine differently, or have all your machines be the same or whatever, and have an easy Pixie boot install with. You can, for example, set a string of all your ZFS options based on BSD install. That was something that Devin Teske and I decided when we were writing the ZFS code, and it's like, well, we might as well make it scriptable so that in the future, we can finish the scripting support. And a Google Summer of Code student was interested in that, and Devin's been mentoring them and running through that.
Oh, very cool.
EdMast has a report on the status of UEFI and also Secure Boot, which hasn't started yet, but it's coming along. The UEFI stuff will be in 10.1 because of some issues they ran into and just concerns about it working. For 10.1, they will have separate images, one for UEFI and one for not. But the 11 snapshots on the website are currently available as a hybrid image that will do both. So unless somebody finds more specific problems with that, I imagine going forward we'll have just a combined image. But
try and unify them.
Yeah, just to make sure that we don't end up with an unusable image on some machines, the 10.1 will include the regular images we've always had, plus separate UEFI ones. And the outstanding tasks for that currently are more documentation and documenting how to do it manually. So BSD install has support for it now in the auto mode, but it doesn't. Nobody's written down the instructions on how to do it by hand if you wanted to.
Oh, okay.
And also, one of the other outstanding tasks is to implement a boot1.efi driver that can do ZFS. Currently, if you're booting UEFI, it only can do UFS. And so if you boot UEFI and try to use the ZFS option that Devin Teskey and I did, it will warn you, hey, you booted UEFI, you're going to have to make it boot BIOS. And if your machine won't, then that's a problem. But it should, so it shouldn't matter. But it tells you, hey, make sure you're going to have to do this if you want it to boot. After 10.1, I'm going to look at possibly offering a small currently you have the option of like a boot pool in your main pool, but that's really nasty. But maybe even just having your kernel be on UFS and the rest ZFS so that you can have it under UEFI, because I know a lot of people on their laptops are going to want that, and until we can get a ZFS bootloader. Okay. And then they also want to make it so that UEFI variables can be stored in non-volatile memory. So, for example, you can make it remember stuff like currently it doesn't have something like the BSD menu, but if it did, you could maybe make it remember which options you liked and so on. And they're still dealing with debugging boot failures with certain firmware implementations. Or, for example, on my laptop, it will fail to boot if you're not using the onboard graphics, but using the Optimus. So I have the Optimus and the option to use either card. If I set it to use the Intel, it works fine. But if I force it to use the NVIDIA, the UEFI can't find the video card. Probably because it's looking at the Intel and it's turned off. And so that's other stuff that still needs to be done. But 10.1 will at least have some support for UEFI, which is good progress that I was not expecting us to have quite so soon.
That's cool.
And then for documentation, all the ZFS stuff I wrote is actually in the official handbook now. So there's a status update about that, but also open tasks specifically. There's a couple of sections that need some work, especially the tuning one. I'm hoping to talk to some people about that at Meet BSD. But also we could use some help with the frequently asked questions and the problem solving sections. So if you use ZFS and have ever run into a problem, where you're having an issue or something, we'd love it if you told us what problem you have so that we could document how to solve that. So that when someone else runs into that same semi-common problem of trying to do this and it did that, that it'll be documented in the handbook. So if you've ever run into any trouble with ZFS, we'd love it if you'd emailed the docs mailing list with even just what problem you had so that we can write out the solutions for people.
Well, cool. That's a great way to get involved, guys.
That way, when someone Googles the problem or the error message, our FAQ section will have the answer for them.
Nice.
And as always, if you're reading through it and see a typo, please let us know.
Well, let's see. The last few items here, some information on the updated VT system console driver, including some of the open tasks still, including implementing remaining features supported by vid control, writing manual pages and kernel interfaces, supporting direct handling of keyboards by KBD, and then CJK fonts. That's in progress. Switching to VT by default. Now, did they turn that on for 10.1 yet?
I'm not sure about 10.1, but I know for 11 it's default.
Okay, we flipped it on here, and it seems nice.
Actually, I think 10.1 it is the default. I'm not sure, but I think so.
Cool. Okay. And let's see, implement compatibility mode to be able to use single byte character sets and key codes. Very cool. Let's see here. Next, we also have updating Open Crypto that John Mark Gurney did.
Yep.
So I guess they added support for AES GCM and AES CTR cryptography modes to the Open Crypto framework. That's cool. FreeBSD being updated to work on some newer ARM boards.
Yep. And the 64-bit.
Qualcomm Snapdragon S4, it looks like, and the Crate. Let's see, what else here? Oh, the ARM 64-bit stuff.
Yep.
That's a good one. So let's get some information on that. The LLDB debugger port. So that's pretty cool.
Yes, getting that debugger so that stuff compiled with Clang and have the Clang debugger is quite useful. I gave a talk about that at EuroBSDCon. And then there was the Foundation update where they talk about everything the Foundation's done in the last 3 months, including the Postgres performance stuff we talked about, the AutoFS auto mounter, the iSCSI stuff, the other iSCSI stuff, the other iSCSI stuff, Ed's projects on UEFI and VT, a lot of the stuff that's actually very nice to finally have, but took forever because nobody wanted to work on it. The Foundation has been funding and making that happen so that we have those bits.
That's cool.
They've come up with a plan on how they're going to do secure boot. Now they just have to actually get around to doing it. The Foundation bought more hardware to beef up the co-locations at New York Internet and at Centex. I think Centex is the test lab. And so now I think New York, NYI is a full mirror of everything that's in California instead of only some of the stuff. And they also announced a collaboration between the Foundation and Cavium, like we talked about the other day, to support that fancy ARM v8 server,
ARM v8.
Including getting some of the hardware for the developers to work on. And like we mentioned earlier, the license agreement with Oracle to have access to the TCKs for Java 7 and 8.
Nice.
They mentioned sponsoring Robert Watson running the Cambridge Dev Summit. They sponsored a developer to organize BSD Day in Argentina. They were a gold sponsor at EuroBSDCon 2014. They raised over $2,000 in donations at EuroBSDCon. Quite impressive.
Nice. Oh, it looks like they're also organizing the developer summit that's happening here in a couple weeks out at Meet BSD.
Yep, the 2 days after Meet BSD. And they also mentioned that Kirk McCusick, Robert Watson, and George Neville Neal, who all on the Foundation, published the design and implementation of the FreeBSD operating system, and that Kirk gave his 2-day tutorial about FreeBSD kernel at EuroBSDCon on top of his ZFS talk, and Drew Levine attended FaucetCon and the Grace Hooper conference.
Nice. Okay. Well, again, that's a long list. So as you can see, and we didn't even cover all the stuff on there, but there is a significant amount.
And that's only stuff that happened between July and September.
Yes. Yes. So refer to that if you want to see, all the gory details and everything that's going on. But it's a lot, and it's exciting, and that's good to see because, a project needs to be active like that. Okay. Moving on to the next item in the news, though, we have some information on monitoring pfSense logs using ELK.
Yes.
So, of course, if you're one of those people who loves really cool graphs and charts that pfSense can produce, then this is something you're going to want to sit up and listen to here. So ELK, which is Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana, is a group of tools that let you collect, store, search, and most importantly, you can visualize logs. So it works with a lot of different things that put logs together that can be sent to one central server for displaying.
That's fancy.
It looks like, it is. Do you have the link up there?
So it's showing, there's a world map showing where the traffic's coming from, because this is IPs that were blocked by country, and it's like predominantly China, obviously, but
of course. This is really cool, though.
Then it shows what was allowed through, what was blocked by the port number, by interface, protocols. That is actually very nice.
Yes, it is. So, of course, he's got all the information on how to get this set up and configured with your pfSense box here. So if you've got a pfSense system, this may be a must-have. I don't know. I mean, I think it's pretty close to being that. This is pretty awesome looking.
I'm looking at doing something like this just to analyze some of the R traffic.
That's really cool. So, again, check out that post, check out the link, and take a look at how to set this up. And, kudos to the guys who did this. This is
very nice.
Yes. Okay. Well, next up, we have some news about IPFW. Yes. So even though we talk an awful lot about PF, of course, a lot of FreeBSD people still love IPFW. I will count myself as one of those. Here. I'm a bigger fan of IPFW personally. Yep. But, it's been mostly dormant in the source tree, but recently we got some updates committed to current.
Well, it got a big update for 10, but now this is a big update for 10.1.
Yeah, it is. So the commit is going to list some of the user visible changes, including performance changes, ABI changes, and internal changes.
Yeah, specifically, you can create tables, but now those tables can have names instead of just numbers, making them infinitely more useful. You can have up to 65,000 tables. Each one can have up to a 63-character name. Tables are also now set aware. So you can have basically multiple sets of firewall rules, so you can switch between them easily. And so now tables can exist separately in the different sets instead of ignoring that, which makes them much more easy. It makes it easy to switch or move tables atomically between rule sets. Lots more functionality, including the swap, lock, limit, user level lookups, etc. Batched add and deletes. New table types, so you can create a flow table as well. The ability to add different types of lookup algorithms for different table types, including looking up by CIDR hash or interfaces or numbers or flows and so on. Table values are now capable of holding multiple data fields for different table argument users and so on. Nice. The main IPFW lock has been converted to an RM lock, making it everything faster. Rule counters were separated from rules itself and made per CPU so that the counters on the rules will be less lock contention and keep going. Lots of other interesting changes. Some ABI changes, meaning that if you're using an old IPFW command line tool, it'll still work with the new kernel interface, except it'll be very confused by table names. So every table that has a name will show up as table 65535 because it won't be able to. The old binary doesn't know how to do names.
Sure. Well, it looks like we got a link here to Olivier's blog where he did some benchmarking of this, and we got some pretty graphs, of course, to go with it.
So Olivier runs the BSD router project, and so has a test lab for benchmarking every change to make sure it's not killing performance on his servers. So he's got a 4-core Xeon 2.13 gigahertz with an Intel X540 AT2, which is a 2-port 10 gigabit NIC. And comparing the before and after of this change, he saw about 100,000 packets per second more going through IPFW, which is quite a bit of traffic. So that's quite good.
That is he says he now dreams of an IPFW sync equivalent to PF sync.
Yes.
Well, that's that's exciting.
His benchmarks were with 2,000 states in the state table. And so that means every one of those packets at 100,000 packets per second had to be compared against those 2,000 states. But because they're using tables to store them now that can have different hashes, they definitely got more improvement. And and he's got all the raw data if you want to do your own analysis or if you're a stats nerd.
Generate your own graphs on your own time. Cool. But yeah, you'll want to check that out. That is exciting to see. Again, if you're an IPFW lover and have a fondness for that.
And if you don't know much about IPFW, I wrote an article on it in the FreeBSD journal. It would have been the May-June issue, I think, that describes how you can do IPFW for things you might not imagine a firewall doing, specifically simulating different conditions like packet loss or latency and so on for video streaming. That's how we use it. To simulate, what it's like when you're streaming from somewhere far away or, streaming over a mobile connection that has packet loss or, bad Wi-Fi or whatever.
Sure.
And also using it to do queues and stuff to be like, well, we have this much bandwidth and us in the IT department would love to be able to do it all the time. But sometimes if we're not using all the bandwidth, we would like the users to be able to use it. But if they're using it all and I want it, I should get it first. And yes, and so you can do queues like that.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I did. A lot of was just bandwidth shaping with IPFW, but that was easy and convenient. And then the firewall stuff was a bonus too. Well, cool. Okay, well, of course, we need to mention the sponsor for this week's episode, which is Tarsnap, and that's tarsnap.com/BSD Now. Go there, let them know that we sent you. Of course, you've heard us talk about this many times, but Tarsnap is going to be the way you want to look at doing backups. You don't want to trust your provider. I know we've heard rumors of Dropbox being hacked this last week and passwords and whatnot.
Yeah.
Tarsnap, you don't have to worry about that because everything's encrypted before it leaves your box, and they don't have access to your data. They don't know what it is.
The only way to access your data is with your crypto key. And, as long as you take care of that.
Should never leave your system.
Exactly. As long as you take care of that and don't lose it, then you're all safe.
Yes, definitely. So, again, you need to be doing backups, and if you're going to be doing them in any kind of remote location, they need to be done encrypted. Yeah. So, take a look at Tarsnap, and, of course, the URL, tarsnap.com/BSD Now. We would appreciate it if you let them know that we sent you.
This week, we're joined by Hiroki Seto of the FreeBSD Foundation. Thank you for joining us.
Appreciate it. So the first question we ask everyone is, what was your first experience with BSD? How did you get introduced to BSD?
It is difficult to express in English because my English is very poor, and please forgive me my poor English, but I'll do the best.
Sure.
So first, I encountered a Unix operating system in my university. So before entering the university, I was using PC98. It's a Japanese-specific IBM compatible, but a bit strange specification machine. And I am using MS-DOS and enjoying using it as a terminal and a terminal to communicate with other friends over the landline phone line communication. And after entering my university, I met Sunwest and IBM AIX first, and I am very impressed by such a workstation and a powerful machine. So after that, I want to have a machine that can run the Unix operating system in a home, and I want to study such operating system. And my major in the university was electrical engineering and not software related, but I want to learn the software technologies. So when I investigate what Unix software I can get at a time was FreeBSD only, because PC98 is a bit different from the IBM AT, so I need a ported version of the PC Unix. So there were Linux in FreeBSD and NetBSD, but only a FreeBSD works on my box. So at the time, if I remember correctly, there were several books with installed CD-ROM. So the version number was 2.2.5 around that. So I tried to install, but my machine was a very poor performance, so it takes 2 days to recompile the X.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is an 8 megabyte RAM and 180 80 megabyte hard drive. So, but I enjoyed, and specifically, I want to use tab, LabTech, to because I was writing a paper and a report of my class in the university. So, and I was extensively using the tech in MS-DOS, but the tech needs a large memory space. So,
Sure.
and on MS-DOS, I am using technology so-called DOS extender to use extended memory from the real mode, 16-bit. So after I heard that tech can be used on Unix more, and it is not ported one. It is authentic
Sure.
data implementation. So yes, it is the reason, and I started to use Unix, and after that I learned how to use network configuration and connect to internet, and yes, so this is my first experience to use FreeBSD.
Very cool. So, what do you do with the FreeBSD project now?
I now currently I am working on the various things, and currently, yes, recent months I am actively working on improving our IPv6 stack, because after Kame project concluded, IPv6 stack is not maintained actively anymore. But many new specification are published in IDF and RFC, so we need to catch up with such a latest specification. So now I'm working on implementation.
Okay, cool. And obviously, you're also on the FreeBSD Foundation board
Yes.
and the FreeBSD core
Yes.
team.
And as a FreeBSD core chief member, I am working on improving the organization itself. So I am currently considering to submit the proposal of the quality assurance team. So quality assurance team is for gathering various efforts to improve our tester infrastructure and quality assessment of each releases and keep the information, such an information into the some kind of unified web interface and share the information among the developers. We have a bunch of efforts in the past and right now, but it heavily depends on the personal efforts. So we used to have Chris Canaway to analyze the performance, but he disappeared, unfortunately. So we need to keep such an effort more continuous manner
Sure.
to improve and know well what we have now and what we should improve. So currently I am going to submit the proposal for such a quality assurance team to as a advisory body to developers and one of the tasks of the core team is direct the development team to some kind of future direction. So such an advisory body will be useful to decision making of the core team. I think.
And I guess
And,
you're also,
yes, I'm the foundation member. I am actively promoting the BSD and the Asian regions. So the activities are including running Asia BSDCon and visiting companies and then negotiating mirrors, having the mirror site in the Asian region.
So that kind of brings up, what is the state of BSD in Japan, and why is NetBSD so popular?
Yes, there are a very complicated history and unfortunate history because first in 1990s, I think if I remember correctly, 1994 or 1995, there were a lot of FreeBSD users. But yeah, at that time, FreeBSD new bus code was introduced into the mainstream. And at the time, so many Japanese FreeBSD users who who could understand the kernel code and very skilled people were thinking to implement another configuration framework based on the config utility. It is implemented in the NetBSD and FreeBSD's new bus code is committed and improved so far, and the NetBSD has another path to enumerate a PCI bus or something like that.
Sure.
But probably most of people in US do not know there's such a code which a Japanese developer had at the time. But most of Japanese developers who liked FreeBSD hoped that their code will be merged at the time. But they did not participate in discussion in the English mailing list. They believed their code is technically superior, but they did not. They did not attend such a discussion and just sending a very long lines of patches to the project. So I think I did not attend such a discussion at the time because my first experience was 1998 or 1999. There's such a long lines of patches just ignored because it is difficult to read and understand, and no Japanese did not explain why it was important for them.
Sure.
So most of the developers were moving to NetBSD because the FreeBSD ignored the patch.
Okay.
And after that, so NetBSD, FreeBSD developers were moved to NetBSD, and some of them established their company. Currently, we have Ethernet Initiative Japan as a major ISP company that uses NetBSD extensively in their service and the products. Just because they know the kernel code well.
Okay.
So it is unfortunate and it is difficult to explain, but the Japanese was a big fan of FreeBSD, but they moved to NetBSD at the time.
Okay.
So obviously Asia BSDCon has a big BSD presence, but at other technical conferences in Japan, are there a lot of BSD users?
Now, Asia BSDCon is almost sole conference for BSD, and there are other open source conferences, but they are mainly for hobbyists, not the developers. So it is not attractive for developers, I think.
So how could that be fixed? You know, what can be improved to make BSD more popular in Japan and the rest of the world?
And as a FreeBSD Foundation members, I'm actively seeking the way to promote the FreeBSD in Japan, and I recently established a local nonprofit to promote the FreeBSD named BSD Research. And I am almost dedicated to FreeBSD, but I should be friendly for the other BSD users because there are a lot of BSD users in Japanese company. So I am trying to use this non-profit organization as a tool to negotiate large companies like Sony or Hitachi or in Japan, because the Japanese do not trust a person who is just eager. So Japanese trust only the person with a foreign background. So I am a foundation member and I have a non-profit organization to promote. So please talk with me. Yeah, I am just started, but I got a positive response from the big company like NEC. NEC sells server and 1U server, and probably their sales is currently #1 in Japan. And they are seeking, they have a bunch of customers who wants to use a FreeBSD on their server, but they do not know how to support the FreeBSD. So I am helping the NAC and providing information and having the meeting to share the information of their products in the future and something like that.
Cool. And any contacts with Sony with their previous users?
Yes.
They're so secretive, we can't get any information.
We almost got one developer to agree to an interview, but then Sony wanted to see the questions and prove them first, and we sent them the questions, and we never heard anything after that.
The Sony and the other so big Japanese companies tend to do not like to disclose their inside of their company.
secret stuff.
Yeah, secret stuff.
Keep the secret sauce secret.
And in Japanese, considering the Japanese custom of the running a company and the organization of the company, we need to talk with a manager class person, not a developer. Developer do not have power to influence to have influence to the decision, and they cannot contact us without permission of
Sure.
the manager class person. It is very difficult, and a gaming company is really in a secret, so it is difficult to find the right person. But I have contact, but he told me he did not want to.
Oh, okay.
Yes, involved, and he is not currently interested in involving the BSD project. So he said he do not have information that the code can be shared, but he said he is sharing information the code with LLVM project.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's cool. Well, I guess
Was there anything else you wanted to mention?
Yes, so next stage BSD come.
yeah.
Yes, so I am about to sending the announcement and the call for papers of the next stage BSD Con in next March, and the date is fixed, and the official web page has been updated already. So the next BSD Con it will be held in March 12th, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the 4 days conference, including 2-day tutorials and meetings and 2-day paper sessions.
Okay.
So, yeah, please come, and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of developers from outside Japan.
Well,
Yes.
me and Alan can both vouch, having
Yes.
been there a couple, many
Yes.
times. That
Yeah.
great conference. If you can
Yeah.
get to Japan or want to go to Japan, great excuse
It's
to
a
do
great
it.
excuse. Japan is
A lot
Tokyo
of
is
fun.
very nice.
We always come back with cool gadgets and
Yes.
stuff. It's really fun.
Yes, Chris was marveling over one of them that I had with me today.
Yeah, and then those little credit card size routers are pretty
Yes,
cool.
they were amazing. And yes, so yes, I'll be there for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
I've
I'm
already
pretty
decided
sure I'll
I'm
be
going
there
to
too,
BSD
so.
Con.
Great. Well, thank you so much
you
for
very
being on the
much.
show this
Thank
week.
you.
Rookie, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, and we're going to be getting into our news roundup. But before we do, of course, we want to mention the other sponsor this week, which is IX Systems, and the URL, ixsystems.com/BSD Now. And they got an interesting article they got posted this week. It looks like by Marty Godsey, who's one of the sales engineers over there, about why spindles still matter.
Yes.
So,
So specifically, they're talking about now that there are bigger hard drives out, like 6 and 8 terabytes. A lot of people are tempted when they're building their NAS or whatever, their storage server, to just get a small number of the bigger drives instead of,
Sure.
and not realizing what performance impact that might actually have. You know, like in my array in my basement, I have 6 3 terabyte drives. If now I could get the same amount of storage out of 3 6 terabyte drives, but
Sure.
while having the same amount of storage, I would get much worse performance because each of those disks can do 250, 300 IOPS and, 100 plus megabytes a second. I wouldn't be able to get 600 and 700 megabytes a second reading and writing to my array if I was only having 3 disks instead of 6.
Sure.
And
Sure,
so,
you're not splitting up the load across many devices.
yeah. So depending on what you're doing, you might actually be better off with more smaller disks because then you have that many more spindles working at once.
Yeah. Well, and like a point he makes here is, aside from considering the amount of storage you need to determine the lowest performance number you're willing to accept and then build your array to try and meet that.
Yeah.
Because,
Often people, they're like, well, we need it to be at least this big and it'd be good if it was fast or whatever. Instead of saying it needs to be at least this fast all the time and then building it to be that. And, a lot of people are like, well, I'll just put it in an SSD and that'll, as an L2
Yeah.
ARC, and that'll make it fast. It's like, well, if you have 25
Yes and no.
terabytes of storage and you put in a 500 gigabyte SSD, 500 gigabytes of your data will be fast.
Yes.
And
the other 20.
yeah, the other 25
Not so much.
terabytes are still going to be the speed of your spindles. So more
Mm-hmm.
spindles is better. And the nice thing about ZFS is if you build it with lots of 2 terabyte drives, even though those are kind of smaller now, you might, your decision might mostly be affected by the price per gigabyte, and oftentimes the smaller drive might be a better deal than the very newest top size drive. Of course, that might just mean 6 terabyte drives are better than 8 terabyte drives. But the nice thing with ZFS is if you fill up an array with 2 terabyte drives or whatever, you can start swapping those with 6 terabyte drives. And once you've done an entire VDEV, then you all of a sudden that VDEV grows, snaps to the larger size, and now you have all that extra storage without having to do any extra work.
Cool. Well, the cool thing about IX is that they write stuff like this and they do
They're
articles
like,
because these guys know what they're talking
as
about.
much as we would love to sell you those super expensive 8 terabyte drives,
Yeah.
you might actually just want to buy a lot more of the 2 terabyte drives instead.
Yeah. We also don't want to have to deal with you calling and saying, "Hey, why isn't it as fast?" Well, you should have gone this
Yeah.
way. We're going to warn you up front and let you know this is what you want to consider if you have minimum speed requirements.
Exactly. That's why it's, rather than just calling, I need a NAS that stores this much, they're like, well, what are you using it for? And, you're doing that? Well, you're definitely going to want to make sure you have at least this level of performance for that. If you're just storing media at your house, maybe you can get away with a couple of big drives.
Sure.
Because
when
that
you start
uses
saying,
less
I
power.
want to do 10 gig and I need to saturate it, well, let's see if we can find something that'll do that.
4
then.
drives isn't going to be enough to do that.
Yeah.
And that's why we buy our hardware from IX, because it's not just that the hardware is great and that it's tested first and that I can trust them and then they have the long warranty. It's the fact that there's this conversation that happens before you buy it where you actually get what it is that you need to solve your problem, rather than rather than getting what you asked for, you get what you actually needed.
Yes, by experienced people who actually understand what's going on in the data center and how to accomplish the goals you have with whatever your project is.
It's kind of an overused term, but sales engineer is because they actually know what they're doing. They're not just in sales.
Yes. So that's extremely important, and you need to take that into account when you're looking at a vendor. So again, if you go to that URL, ixsystems.com/BSD Now, you can fill out a form there and download their free guide to selecting a vendor when you purchase a server, the things you need to know and need to ask of whoever your provider is going to be. And what the business case on why you should use IX and ways to talk to management about that as well. So again, we highly recommend it. Go over there and let them know that we sent you. Okay, well, in the news roundup this week, we got some information, some more pfSense stuff. First up, pfSense on Hyper-V. And do you have the
link is
article up there? Okay. But interesting article here talking about, in case you didn't know, that the latest pfSense snapshots actually support running on Hyper-V now, which is pretty cool.
Because Hyper-V support was introduced in FreeBSD 10, and now that the new pfSense snapshots are based on 10 stable, which is basically 10.1, they have support for this now.
Cool. Yeah. So if you're using the older pfSense, 8.x series, then you're going to hold off, grab the newer snapshots for now. But the author of the post is going to talk about his experience getting pfSense up and running, and he will give you lots of interesting links to read if you're interested in possibly doing the same thing.
And mostly also talks about why he chose pfSense over a bunch of Linux-based tools that he might have been more familiar with being a Linux developer or Linux person, but why he decided on pfSense as the best solution.
Well, including its IPv6 support and high-quality code. So that's some high praise there for pfSense. So check that out if you guys are interested in doing anything with pfSense and Hyper-V. Okay, next up, OpenBSD is a daily driver. So we had a curious drive-by Reddit user post to ask the community about using OpenBSD as an everyday desktop OS. And you can go ahead and click the link and read through all the comments yourself. But the overall consensus we got out of it is that it works great, stays out of your way, and is quite reliable. Of course, being that it's OpenBSD.
Yes, and
the caveats. Go ahead.
One of the advantages that OpenBSD has is that most of the developers use it on their laptop as their daily driver.
Correct. So some of the caveats that people would mention, though, is there's no Adobe Flash support, although some people that's a bonus, not a negative. And it requires a little bit more of a hands-on approach to updating. I'm not sure.
They don't really have a tool like FreeBSD Update. There's a third-party tool, but in general, you don't upgrade OpenBSD. You reinstall the newer snapshot over top and just keep your home directory or whatever.
Okay. So require a little bit more hands-on approach to updating.
But
I think,
it's documented, so...
binary.
They don't have any binary drivers of any kind.
Yeah, I say there's no NVIDIA driver, but if you have the open source one that works on your chipset, then you're good to go.
I think they have.
So the Nuvo?
I don't know exactly where they are for graphics. I've not run OpenBSD on my laptop before.
Sure. But, if you've ever considered running OpenBSD as your daily driver, take a look at this link. There's some interesting comments on there and some more information and tips about things you may run into and stuff to watch for when you're doing that. Very cool. And speaking of PF, since we've done that a couple times today, and logs, we have also an author who's written a post talking about an OpenBSD box sitting in front of all his VMs at a colocation and his details and experiences with firewall logs. So I guess he says he usually investigates any IPs of interest with whois, NSLOOKUP, etc., but obviously that's going to get somewhat tedious and repetitive. So he sets out to find the best way to gather firewall log statistics. He came across a Perl script. To do this, he edited a bit, and now he is a happy, lazy sysadmin once again. That is usually the happiest sysadmin, Alan, the lazy ones when
exactly.
everything's automated.
You do it right the first
works.
time so that you won't have to keep doing it.
Yep. And of course, since he's lazy and wants to encourage other lazy sysadmins to be happy, he posted his updated PF script, and we'll have the link to GitHub where you can grab that. So you'll want to check that out. Maybe it'll make your life a little bit easier too.
Yep. That combined with the thing with the elk thing we talked about at the top of the show, you get all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. We got lots of good PF and logs and all kinds of information.
Well, because the other interesting thing with obviously with doing it on the firewall is that you can log traffic that you allow as well as what you block. So you can also just look at, well, here's how much bandwidth I've used. How did I end up using that all?
Yeah. Where did that go?
Yeah, I know that used to be important for me when I had a cable connection that was only allowed to do like 75 gigabytes a month. Keeping track of what I was using and where it was going, and realizing there was something screwy going on with my email client, making it re-download big messages over and over and over again, using up a bunch of bandwidth. And by cleaning up my mail client, I solved my bandwidth usage problem.
Nice. Well, cool. And we will mention the author actually just tweeted that he's excited that his script hacking and lazy adminery were just mentioned in BSD Now. So that's awesome.
He's obviously watching the show.
He's watching the show. So props to writing this, by the way. This is pretty cool.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay, next up, FlashRD 1.7 has been released.
Yes.
So for those who aren't familiar, FlashRD is a tool used to create OpenBSD images for embedded hardware devices executing from a virtualized environment. So the new version looks like it's based on the unreleased OpenBSD 5.6, but soon to be released, and automatically adapts to the number of CPUs you have for building. It looks like some of the important fixes include 4K drive support and lots of various other improvements. Do you have a full list there, Alan?
Yeah, on the website there's a full list. Talks about adapting to the number of CPUs, like you mentioned. Resolve.conf, it's been moved out of ETC with a static link. If /var is a tempfs, that way
Sure.
it doesn't mess things up, and they have all the,
Some LBR. It looks like they changed a lot of stuff for working with non-512 byte sector size.
which is very common when you're writing to flash media, and so that makes sense.
Cool.
So yeah, this is kind of a weird cross kind of between MFS BSD and Nano BSD and a bunch of other stuff, but it basically allows you to build OpenBSD on a memory stick or whatever that you can use for booting small appliances and stuff. Great for basically building a firewall or whatever else. And I remember back originally, it was required to use FlashRD to boot OpenBSD and Beehive, but that's since been fixed so that the regular grub loader can actually handle the default OpenBSD install CD now. But that's why I learned about FlashRD in the first place.
Nice. Okay, so if you're interested, of course, take a look at the link, and he's got some links to slides and audio from the main developer on the website as well. So lots of good information and a neat project. That's exciting. Okay, it's time to get to our questions this week. So first up is from Antonio asking about hard drive errors. He said, "How's it going, BSD boys?" Well, I think we're doing well. So he said, "I have a question regarding hard drive error reporting. I've been running FreeNAS for a year now, which I built with the drives I had on hand, in this case, 4 1.5 terabyte drives, mirrored. Soon the drives started to fail. FreeNAS is reporting read errors, which would eventually led to the drive being unmounted and the pool running degraded. Since my FreeNAS server had the data that I cannot live without, I replaced the failing drives. Out of curiosity, I took one of the bad drives, jammed it into a Linux box, and ran Open Media Vault to see how long it would take me to kill it. The failed drive has been going for about 6 months, and I've not seen any issues with it. I've been streaming video from it fairly regularly. Is FreeNAS or BSD calculating the failure error incorrectly? Are there false positives? Any advice and help would be great. Thanks. Keep up the good work.
I wouldn't say there was false positive, but sometimes a hard drive can have a problem and then be fine, right? So when the firmware in the hard drive will see, I tried to read the sector and it failed, so it throws the error, but then it relocates that sector to a different one so that it won't have that problem next time. And so that can do it. Also, ZFS is more sensitive, or not more sensitive, is better at detecting.
It's a better,
Because it has checksums, it can actually detect when the data it read isn't the same as when it wrote it. Whereas a regular file system won't, and will just return the bad data without even knowing anything's wrong. So your problem might be that Open Media Vault just isn't knowing that there is an error happening. Also, FreeNAS has SmartD and stuff going, so it learns about the failure ahead of time, and basically it tried to warn you that this drive is in the process of, has had some errors and may fail, so you're definitely going to want to replace that sooner rather than later. Whereas, without that extra monitoring, at some point the drive will just stop working, and you won't have as much chance to actually replace it.
Yeah, you actually get one in the mail being shipped to you and stuff while it was in the process of failing.
Yeah, and get it replaced. So I wouldn't say that it was FreeNAS was doing it incorrectly or anything. I would say that the drive is suspect, and I would only ever use it for other stuff. Like often, I have one machine in the basement that's just got a mirror of 4 suspect hard drives. It's a 4-way mirror, and one of the drives died after a day, and the other 3 are still going. But I don't trust any one of them because they've all had at least one error before.
It may limp along, but still, like you've notice has been given. Something smells rotten.
Yeah, it's like you said, you didn't want to take any chances with it, and that's exactly why.
Cool. Okay. Well, hope we answered your question there, Antonio. Next up, we have Don. He's asking about jails versus zones. He says, hey guys, I spent some time over the last weekend watching some of the videos from the Lumos days, and this one in particular was interesting to me, which he supplies the link for. He said, I don't know if you've ever watched any of Brian Cantrell's talks or not, but he's about as amusing as James Mickens.
Yes. Brian Cantrell, I've seen a couple of his, but he did one about the tail utility. He called Unix spelunking, going back through the history of the tail utility to solve a bug that Illumos was having, where you can do tail minus F to keep tailing the log. But if you're on Illumos, if your log rotate tool rotated the log away and put it and started a fresh one, tail wouldn't show you any new data until the file had grown at least as big as the old file, which might be never if your old one was bigger than your new one before it gets rotated again. And a bunch of other weird problems they were having, and eventually they solved it. And fix the tail utility in Illumos. But it was definitely interesting to watch him go through how the tail utility evolved from when it was first introduced, and so on. And yes, James Mickens is the guy, the Microsoft security researcher who wrote about being massaged upon, and so on. Yes, they're both very amusing people to watch talks by.
Cool. Okay, he says, at my day job, I heard both Solaris and Linux machines. It's a bit of a stretch to convince those in charge to try something crazy like FreeBSD, but he says he's working on it. So he says, I have some amount of experience using Solaris zones. Have you ever covered the strength and weaknesses or pluses and minuses of Solaris zones versus FreeBSD jails? How different do you think the LX branded zones are from FreeBSD's Linux simulation? He said, I'm just beginning to research this kind of information, but making slow progress, what with life and all getting in the way. Curious to know if either of us or the broader audience has any particular answers in this regard. Well, I've not personally played with zones. How about you,
I've never
Alan?
used Solaris. As far as I know, they have, especially in SmartOS, which is a version of Illumos from Brian Cantrell's company, they have a bit more of the resource control stuff. FreeBSD's added some of that, but is still playing catch up a little bit there. But I don't know what LX branded zones are or what.
Sure.
How
Sounds like Linux emulation zones or something.
Right, but that really doesn't have anything to do with FreeBSD's Linux emulation, which is just an adapter that converts Linux system calls to FreeBSD system calls, and works with jails, but it doesn't actually have anything to do with jails.
I bet
I've never found FreeBSD jails lacking, except for maybe being able to limit how much RAM a jail can have or something.
Mm-hmm. Well, I bet you we have some sysadmins out there who do have some experience both on Solaris and FreeBSD, of course.
Yes.
So if that's something you could help us answer, please write in. Let us know.
Yes.
We'll pass it along in next week's episode. That would be very helpful, actually, because you can enlighten both me and Alan as well, not being Solaris guys.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's see. Who's next here? Andrew asking about a Beehive
Yes,
follow-up.
he was having
says
performance problems the other week. Remember we talked to him?
That's right. Okay, I'll let you read this one.
He says he analyzed his bridge setup more closely and found the problem, but thanks to BSD Now team for quick response. He says his Beehive VirtIO is now giving him over 680 megabits per second. I've done even better out of it, so he might still have something he can do, but I think he said he's using a Realtek NIC, and so that might be his problem for getting more than that. He said the biggest reason I started to play with Beehive is AltQ. He wants to get rid of it primarily because it's the only thing that he has to compile a custom kernel for, and why not get rid of that? But he said also the last draw was that FreeBSD 10, apparently something with AltQ wasn't working well with IGB drivers, which is the Intel gigabit NICs. So all that put together to bring him out of hibernation, try to get rid of AltQ and switch to running OpenBSD in Beehive.
Okay.
He came up with two major solutions, which is Beehive to sandbox the firewall from the rest of the system. He says that way it'd be more secure and more interesting, shaping stuff like traffic shaping in both directions for applications on the same physical box. He says Beehive VirtIO driver does not support AltQ either. So he looked at Beehive plus OpenBSD plus the new PF, which uses AltQ is basically this pluggable system, and they just use the one AltQ algorithm that everybody settled on after all the research. So it's not really that different than AltQ. It's just simpler because they got rid of all the pluggable stuff.
Sure.
He says, this will give me a lot of benefits, but he needs to support running OpenBSD and FreeBSD, so he has to keep track of both and so on. And so far, all of his servers are FreeBSD, so he'd rather just stick with FreeBSD. He says the FreeBSD with binary updates and packet NG is very easy for him, and he likes that. And whereas OpenBSD, they have M tier, which is a third-party company that has a binary update kind of thing, and he's looking at that. So he says, do you know if it's possible to automate the grub-beehive stuff? Yes, if you just echo the thing /n, the thing, whatever, and pipe it into grub, it will do it. I will send you my script that does exactly that. But yes, It's easy to just echo those commands, echo them into a pipe to grub-beehive, and it'll run the commands for you. You just load the kernel and boot.
We just updated that port a couple days ago, too. Peter Green sent me some new stuff. So there's some fixes there, I think, for OpenBSD as well.
I think also to get NetBSD working, I think is in there as well.
Yes. So make sure you've got the most recent.
Yeah. And he says other option is use Beehive plus FreeBSD and IPFW for DummyNet, and then PF for the firewall part. He says he even saw some patches for PF to actually get DummyNet functionality. I've never heard of that, but that might be interesting.
No.
But I guess they didn't make it into mainstream at this point. Extremely low information on running IPFW with only DummyNet plus PF. So maybe it's a very good candidate for a tutorial.
Okay.
In the, like I mentioned, the May-June issue of the FreeBSD Journal, I have a whole article on running IPFW with DummyNet and with queues to do some of the queuing stuff as well. If you, instead of, and you can combine the two, right? So you can say, create a pipe that's 10 megabits or whatever and put the people into it. Or you can say, here's a pipe of this much bandwidth, and then queues feed into that so that instead of all the people sharing that 10 megabits evenly, the IT department gets 90% of it to 10% for the other people. But if the IT department's not using it, then the other people can have it, and so on and so forth. So yes, you should definitely check that out as well. And he says, is using a firewall inside Beehive considered secure or not? It should be fine. There's always a chance, because Beehive is new, there's a chance there could be a weird bug or something. But in general, yes, it's just as secure as running it on the hardware. As long as, your Beehive doesn't crash and then you have no firewall.
Yeah. Yes. Which I don't know. Yeah, that could be an issue for sure.
I've started seeing newer servers now have like a bypass mode on the NIC, so that while it's rebooting, the NIC just passes traffic until it finishes rebooting, which is weird.
Yeah, that is a little weird.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good. That was a good follow-up there. Thank you for sending that in. So next up, we have from Richard asking about LSI and JBOD. He said, I have a single-port LSI HBA, which physically has two external SFF 8088 ports. Blah.
Yeah.
Sorry, couldn't read that there. Cross-eyed. LSI calls this AD.
Yes.
He says, can I connect both ports in parallel to a JBOD and get double bandwidth? A, single port equals no multipath and LUNs don't get duplicated, or B, I have only one JBOD enclosure, so my second HDA-PHY is unused. I'd like to know whether cabling in parallel from one port works to double the bandwidth or not. What do you think on that?
This is the type of question I have to ask somebody IX.
Yes, I say I don't. That's over my head.
Yeah. I on mine at home I do have it double wired. So like the sorry, what do you call it? The backplane in the front has two ports, and they're both connected to the same controller, and so in each device doesn't show up twice. Because I have an A to I, which is exactly the same thing, but the ports are internal instead of external. And then I have a 4I, 4E, which is one internal port and one external port. So, yeah, I think if you connect both, you get the double the bandwidth. I don't actually know. That is something you would have to ask LSI or IX or somebody.
Yes. But hopefully they can get an answer for you, or maybe one of our listeners knows and we'll write it in.
But in general, connecting both can't hurt. I just don't know if it'll actually give you the double the speed. There's sometimes one way to find out. Try with one and then try with two and see if the speed's different.
Yeah. Let's see what happens. Cool. Okay.
So our last question.
Yep. From Robert asking about package versus ports. He says if he inherits a server that he needs to maintain and I need to update packages, he says, I don't know whether the packages were installed via PKG or ports, and as such, I don't know if any of them have custom compile options. If I upgrade via package, the applications that depend on custom compile options will no longer work. I'm aware of the fact that I can lock packages to package lock to prevent this from happening, but the problem is you may not know for which of the packages that's the case. So he asked if there's an efficient way of finding out which packages came from ports or from binary, and you already replied to him, Mal.
Yes. So if you do package info -f on the package in the annotations, if it was installed via PKG, it will write down which repository it came from. Because that, for example, at Scale Engine, we have a Scale Engine repository that's built with our custom options, and then we have the FreeBSD repository. So that can be a different too. Like just because it came from PKG doesn't mean it's not customized, because it could be from a custom repo. So yes, when you install from PKG, it notes there's a repo_type annotation that will say binary if you install it from PKG, and then there's also one that will just note which repository, and you should be able to query those with package query like you were doing there. So that should help there. And I think the ports tree, if you have a new enough one, will note something along that, like the repo type will be something other than binary, and that will give you the details. And like you said, when it does package info, name of package, you get stuff. If you do package info -f, it'll give you more stuff. In particular, it also lists all of the options and what they were set to, so that if it was a custom from ports, that still doesn't help you. You don't know which options they changed, and package info -f will have those written down, so you'll be able to tell which ones might have been changed. And yes, and then you can use that data and feed it into either a Poudriere to build your own custom package repo. You know, if you need the same set of options on 10 different servers, rather than running all those from ports, you could just make your own repo and overlay it on top of the FreeBSD repo.
Cool.
Yeah. And randomly, I was talking with the guy that writes the library for parsing the config file for package, UCL, libs-UCL, and I've got him to implement a priority system. So when you're including files, you can say this file is more important than that file. So in a future version, it'll be easier to have your package repo be more take priority over a different package repo. So that'll be interesting.
Cool. Okay, well, Good answer on that. Hopefully that gives you all the info you need to manage that system you acquire.
Yep.
Okay. Well, next up, we're going to try something a little different here
Yes,
this week.
new
We're
segment.
adding a new segment. Yes. So in addition to our feedback segment, we're going to try and have a little new part of the show here where we highlight funny or particularly interesting posts from any of the BSD mailing lists. So this may not happen every week. It just depends on if there's content or not, but we're going to try to highlight some things that maybe we find amusing. And of course, we want to say special thanks to our viewer, Brian, for coming up with this idea.
Yes.
So we're going to give it a shot, Brian.
Although
See how this
we
goes.
didn't use the one that kind of started the idea either. The email that somebody dug up from like 1996 or something was from, what's his name? The WikiLeaks guy.
Oh, Julian.
Julian Assange emailed the FreeBSD mailing list saying that FreeBSD should have a non-CVS like OpenBSD does.
Right.
So that suggests that Julian Assange was at one point a FreeBSD user.
That's right. That's right.
But anyway, so this week's mailing list gold, we have a commit from Ted Unangst, popular for doing a lot of the LibreSSL stuff, where he made it fix to the head utility on OpenBSD. And in his log message says, fix a critical distributed denial of service in head. Use the correct exit code on failure, reported by so-and-so. The funny thing is that the head utility can't be a distributed denial of service attack, right? There could be some denial of service attack locally, like a resource exhaustion or something, but that wouldn't be distributed per se. It was just a funny commit message. But being Phoronix, they wrote a whole story about it and, claimed that there's a critical problem in OpenBSD and oh no, everybody better update or they're going to get DDoSed.
Right. Yeah. I saw that this last week. I was like, really?
Yeah. There was another funny one commit. I think it was also for head.c or one of the other utilities. Like, fix a 32-year-old bug by applying the 27-year-old patch.
Yeah, that's right. Here's the log message. Fix a 37-year-old bug introduced by Bill Joy on August 24th, 1977 that was already present in the 1BSD release on March 9th, 1978 by merging Keith Bostic's 22-year-old fix from 4.4 BSD. And then it says, not kidding, by the way. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah,
So
and it even has a use case for duplicating where if you pipe head, if you take date and pipe it into head file 1 and then dev s standard in, it causes a problem. And so they got that fixed.
I'm glad that's fixed. I mean, I don't know if we could have survived in a couple decades.
The FreeBSD utility, head utility doesn't have that particular, it had changed so much from 4.4 BSD that it doesn't have any of the same code to have that problem. But that was funny.
So our next one was a mailing list post, it looks like, to the FreeBSD ports. Thanks to all who put in the work to get Bash working properly. Previous builds failed with a Bison error. But today's pig reinstall occurred, and an installed Bash was also successful. So I'm glad that we're able to reinstall the pigs on your box.
I'm guessing that was supposed to say PKG install?
I'm sure that's what it was. Yep. And then this is one that you apparently replied to and took seriously. Yes. I think everyone else was laughing, but whatever. Next up, we have another post to the FreeBSD doc mailing list asking, hey, I don't have a clue what I'm doing wrong, but I tried installing FreeBSD 9,9.3,10 on my VMware player, and it seems to install okay, but after it boots up, I can't get out of the DOS type environment. The screenshots I've seen look similar to Windows, but I don't know how I can get that. I didn't think I had to be a programmer to use this. Sent from Redacted and sent from Windows Mail. Yeah. So, do we need to say more there?
Yeah. So I told him if he grabs PCBSD and installs it in a VMware player, he will have a graphical environment by default. Or I linked him to the handbook where it describes how to install XFCE.
Nice. But yes, if you guys run across stuff like that, send that in, by the way, because those are interesting and humorous.
Yes.
But speaking of sending this stuff in, and, as we wrap up the show, of course, we'll mention we do post all our tutorials in their entirety at bsdnow.tv, and send us stuff into feedback at bsdnow.tv. Yes. If it's something interesting like that, or somebody else quashes another 35-year-old bug, like that's kind of cool, and we'll highlight that in a future mailing list gold segment. And, of course, don't be shy. We love suggestions for anything you'd like to see in future episodes as well. Yes. Get in touch with us. And, of course, me and Alan see that along with TJ, the producer.
Yep. We do the show for you, so you have to help out too.
Correct. Correct. So, of course, you can watch live Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC, and we would enjoy having you with us for the live episode, see all the stuff that happens in between the segments and before and after, etc. And, of course, we can try and interact with you on IRC a little bit that way, too. So, excellent.
Thank you for watching, Dan.
Thank you for watching, guys, and we'll be back next week.